Yep.
All right, we will carry on with our submission hearings. Welcome, Russell, to your submission. Thank you for coming in and taking the time to submit verbally. We've got your written submission, which we've so yeah, thank you. You have got 10 minutes if you'd like to leave some time for questions at the end. Be helpful.
Great, thank you to the Commission, all the councillors listening in today, and for those listening online. So you've read our submission, so all I want to do is add some flavour into it, and as you say, allow some time for questions at the end. Next slide, please. So there are three key components of our submission. Our thoughts on the road to zero emissions, some specific feedback on cash fares and the issues around those, and on bus advertising and our view on that. Next slide, please. So very quickly, a little bit about GoBus. So I'm Russell Turnbull. I'm the Director of Business Development for GoBus Transport, and we are the current majority provider of public transport here in the region, and this submission is on behalf of GoBus. So over the years, GoBus has grown from a Waikato-based business, which it is still based, head office is still here, but is now a national company with over 2,500 employees and 2,000 vehicles and 40 depots. So we get to see and feel most parts of New Zealand, and really our sort of heart still lies in the Waikato, but we've carried on that kind of approach throughout the rest of the country, both big and small areas. We have three brands that we represent. GoBus is our major urban and school brand. We have Johnson's, which is our coaching brand, which is 5-star coaches for tourists, which are thankfully returning. And Skybus, which is the airport transfer brand, currently doing the airside transfers between aircraft and the terminal. And shortly, within the next week or two, we should confirm the purchase, or at least our parent company, Kinetic, will confirm the purchase of NZ Bus, which has operations in Auckland, Tauranga and Wellington. Next slide, please. So just getting straight into our submission. So putting aside Minister Wood's announcement yesterday, I guess we are always interested in where councils might want to go with zero emissions, and we fully support what council wants to achieve with regards to achieving zero carbon and zero emissions going forward. And I guess we're well in front of that curve as far as supply of electric buses and also charging infrastructure. We have 10 buses in Auckland, which has been going since January last year, and 25 in Christchurch currently, with another 16 to join by the end of the year. And what I can say is that the charging infrastructure around that has been extremely complex, because what you have to do is match what the vehicles are going to do, what their loadings are going to do, what their pattern is available for recharging, and then the battery is required, and then what charging infrastructure you need. And what we did in Auckland is quite different to what we're doing in Christchurch, and in fact Christchurch is further evolving as we develop further infrastructure and charging patterns. So what I guess I'm trying to say is appreciate council is trying to create a platform for the future, but it is extremely complex, and we know as an operator how hard that is. But companies like ourselves can offer the expertise of saying what works in different areas and why it works, rather than each individual council having to reinvent the wheel every time. And of course, with this type of infrastructure comes a little bit of risk. And the risk right now is that charging of zero emission buses is rapidly evolving. So instead of having to charge overnight at the moment, where it might take 4 or 5 hours, even 6 to 8 hours, we're looking at a future in 2, 3, 4 years of charging as quickly as 10 minutes, which changes everything. It changes how much depot space you need, it changes the type of buses you require. And all we're saying is, you know, if you make a decision now on charging infrastructure and land you might need, it's all going to change in a couple of years. And is that really a risk that council wants to take, or is it something that they would prefer to carry on leaving with the operators? Next slide, please. The other thing is the batteries. So zero emission bus batteries decline over time. And a company like ourselves, who can manage a bus's whole life up to 23 years, can actually move buses around according to where they need to be. That wouldn't necessarily be something that a council could do. And a good example of that is that we currently cascade buses out of our urban fleets into our school fleets, because you start with a bus that might need to be doing 400 kilometres a day, slowly peeling down to a school bus that only needs to do 60 kilometres a day. So we don't need to keep changing the batteries, which are, by the way, very expensive in a bus. We can actually get a full 23 years life out of it. And we're moving buses backwards and forwards between islands and regions to try and get the right balance. So I guess as far as zero emissions go, we're just saying, look, there's quite a bit of risk involved versus perhaps leaving that opportunity with the bus companies to manage. Just one final point. What we would be very unhappy to happen would be for any one company to have an advantage over another, and that includes where it goes to renting council-provided space, where another company has its own space already within the city, for instance. So all we would ask is, if you do go down this path, that it is full commercial rents, so that one company could choose either to use your provided area or not to, as long as it has the same commercial basis of that kind of decision. Next slide, please. One thing you may be aware of is that bus driving comes with its risks, and having cash on the buses certainly creates too much temptation for some people, and that puts our drivers in a position where they can be robbed. So, and that robbed and assaulted. So what we are putting forward to all councils, and have done for several years, is that cash no longer needs to be on buses in this economy. We've already had it off the buses in Auckland for the last 2 years. That was a COVID-19 initiative. And we know that there are areas where using cards may be a challenge, but we also know that it would be better to target those specific areas where cards are a challenge, rather than create this bigger risk because we allow cash everywhere. So from a health and safety viewpoint, this is one way we can reduce the risk for drivers on the road. And as a council contracted business, you also carry some of that risk as well as part of a PCBU position. Final slide, please. Just finally, before we hopefully have time for questions, just on bus advertising, each council, and your council, does see bus advertising as a revenue opportunity. And I know from sitting on the other side of the fence, it feels like, you know, the companies are making a lot of money selling ads on the back of buses. But I can assure you that that revenue is offset against the tender prices that we put in. But as a national provider, and this is my role, is I go out to tender and offer a national solution. And from that, we get a better price, because the national providers of advertising sales only have to go to one company to do that work. So I would sort of strongly recommend that the best net outcome is to allow the bus companies to sell the advertising. Mostly national companies nowadays, they get really good deals, and they definitely pass those through on the tender prices, which reduces the cost to ratepayers. That's a quick summary of my submission.
Thank you, Russell. We've got 1 minute left for any questions from the floor. Thanks, Rodney.
About the buses, are you able to buy them?
Yes.
Yeah.
So quick summary of buses. So the first 9 the first 28 of them, we leased them. To be honest, 2 years ago when we were doing this deal, we were a bit uncertain about what was happening, but we've grown so much in confidence that going forward, we are actually buying these vehicles because we have that great confidence. And we believe that we are now getting a very good price, and on certain types of runs, we're now kind of equaling what diesel buses would cost. So we're really happy to invest in this technology now, and delivery from overseas is quite quick nowadays. The charging infrastructure is what takes time because you require consents, you require a lot of design time and working with the electricity suppliers.
Yeah, that's all. Thanks.
Okay, that's the end of your 10 minutes. Councillor Tegg,
Very quick question.
we do have other submitters waiting.
Okay.
Quickly.
So one of the issues is diesel buses are locked into contracts, maybe out to 3 or 4 years. Do you see any room for those contracts to be renegotiated so that we can actually get these electric buses on the road quicker?
Absolutely, we're always up for negotiation. And as I said, several years ago, we were quite hesitant about buying vehicles with only a short window before the end of the contract. I think we'd be a lot more confident now to have those discussions, even with that short window. It'd just be a matter of what the negotiations look like.
Thank you for your succinct answer. Yeah, and thank you for making the time to come in today. Appreciate it.
Thank you for time for hearing.
All right, next up we have Peter Nation from Fieldays. Welcome, Peter. And you also have 10 minutes. If you could allow time for questions at the end as well, that'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and those online. It's a pleasure to be able to talk to our submission, which we made on the 29th of July. It's really nice to be able to talk in person. I won't go into background of what Fieldays is because most people should know that. I guess the thrust of our submission is around consistency and fairness in terms of the public transport plan, in terms of clause P28B. Most people will be aware we shift about 13,000 people a year and wanting to grow that for the Fieldays event, which is the largest business event in New Zealand annually, but it happens to be run in the Waikato. Our thrust is to get more people off road, meet our sustainability goals, and if you look at 13,000 people off the road, that's a lot of cars. It's about 20 to 25 tonnes of carbon removed, and we want to grow that area. But up until now, largely, we've met all of that cost ourselves. Under that clause within the Waikato Regional Transport Plan, in the past, we haven't been eligible because we don't actually run a free event. However, we are aware that the councils have worked with other events in the Waikato that have paid access and have subsidised transport. So I want to be clear, I'm not looking for 100% subsidy, but I would like to be able to work on shared costs. So when you think about the context of 33,000 people a day coming to our event, buses provide a very excellent way of moving that many people quickly, particularly in the last 2 years. I've been talking to your last submitter. We've been working with GoBus on double deckers. We can move 90 people at a time, and we actually have been doing that very well. It also, of course, provides a really good education platform to the public of both Waikato and New Zealand on using public transport and the ease of using it, and the enjoyment they can have in becoming to a large event. As I said, it builds nicely on our sustainability goals ourselves around reducing the footprint of our large-scale event. Most people in this committee will be fully aware of our annual contribution to the region, but for us, GDP of $100 million a year to the Waikato alone, and $250 million in GDP contribution to New Zealand. So, that's why the thrust of our submission is around we're making quite an annual contribution to the region, consistently measured, and we're asking for some support back the other way to bring the public and public transport. This will be my 13th submission in 18 months, and the thrust of those submissions are largely on transport modes, and we've wanted to have a voice at the table around forward planning and moving large numbers of people by public transport. And we think, longer term, if we can get more and more people using transport, but we don't see that should necessarily just be at our cost. The cost of public transport for us this year, the buses alone, will be in the vicinity of $120,000. So when the public take a bus to our event from our park and rides, they see it as free. However, that's largely borne by us, and it's effectively out of their ticket price. So that's really the thrust of my submission, is really consistency and fairness of large-scale events like ours, being able to make application and work with council and councils on a shared pricing plan for the use of public transport to an event the likes of Fieldays. And of course, Mystery Creek also holds a number of other events, large-scale events, two of which will be held between now and Christmas of over 10,000 people. And we think that we also need to start focusing on moving large-scale numbers of people from the city and or surrounding areas to large-scale events like that using public transport. That is my submission. I'm happy to take some questions.
Thank you, Peter. We have a question from Councillor O'Leary.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for your submission. Really, really clear what you're asking of us. Just to clarify, the other criteria in the plan around it needs to be in the regional boundary, and 20,000 attendees, etc. If we amended the plan to remove free, are you happy with the other criteria that's in there? And then supplementary to that, you actually just mentioned Mystery Creek's got a lineup of events around 10,000 people. That wouldn't necessarily come under the criteria of the current plan.
No, correct. So we meet criteria one, obviously, if I just focus on Fieldays, consistently 33,000 people a day. And that's measurable numbers. We've got ticketing. We can even tell you who they are and where they come from. The event is within the Waikato regional boundaries, quite obviously. And as I said, we can demonstrate wider benefits to the community. So at this stage, I'll stick with the 20. I'm not trying to change that just at the moment. I'm just signalling that there's an opportunity if we start working together, we can move more people. And of course, if you think about in the context of people park and riding out of either Hamilton City or other satellite towns, the economic benefit goes back to them because they come back to their car and eat and accommodate or whatever. So there's ongoing benefits of then starting to capture those other events. But initially, we really want consistency under point one, which is free entry for attendees.
Yeah. And Peter, if we looked at some form of contribution, because you did say at the beginning the society would contribute something. So I mean the end game is getting people, giving it free to the public. So sure. That's the message. But if we made it fair across the board, what sort of contribution would you think would be fair if we enabled it in a policy?
My understanding is, and I'm not totally sure about this, but it's a third at the moment for some other events. So I don't know that for a fact. That's hearsay, so you've got to be careful with that. But I could also say, look, anything's better than nothing, Councillor O'Leary. Like it's at the moment we're paying the whole value, and I just want consistency, really.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Very clear. Thanks, Peter.
Okay. Thanks for those questions. And Peter, thank you for your submission. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Nice to be meeting in person.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
All right. We will jump to Mr. Paul Johnson. As our previous submitter before you has not turned up yet. Welcome. Paul, you'll have 5 minutes to present. If you could leave some time at the end for some questions within that 5 minutes, that would be appreciated. But yeah, over to you. Thank you.
Oh yeah, live. Yeah, chairman, councillors, or whoever else is here. Yeah, I'm just approaching this from a rather different angle. It's just a public coming to speak. I pressed the wrong button on the submission, so I'm here. And I've got a few notes. And I didn't get confirmation that my submission had been received, so it's even more of a surprise that I'm here. But yeah, I've been trained in the Kaizen principles of continuous improvement and spent a lot of my life with big companies, just advising, observing, advising and changing in small manageable steps. But recently, I suppose it's old age, but I've become aware of waste and probably the biggest one that's concerning me, and it happened to come up at the same time as the transport review, was empty buses. Constantly seeing empty buses doing orbital circuits round and round and round. I've just seen one at peak lunchtime bus it 2 people, peak lunchtime in Hamilton. And it's interesting to listen to the submissions that the previous 2 that are wanting buses, wanting to keep buses. Maybe we should get rid of buses. So look at it from a totally different angle. People were quoting carbon footprints. I'm not sure what his name was, but those 90-seater buses sit for 3 hours in a queue waiting to get into that car park. I've been to Fieldays, but in front of them and behind them are cars with 1 or 2 people. Get rid of the buses. Those 90 people could easily be accommodated in the cars that are going there anyway. So it's a rather different approach to managing the movement of people. And the previous submission I just overheard, they seem to be subsidising their overhead costs by managing to get large revenues from advertising on the buses, because I can't see how, as a company, they can make money going round and round and round in circles all day long with no passengers. And most of the time it is with no passengers. I don't know if any of you have actually observed, but I would say 90% of the time from 10 till 4, there are 1, 2 or 3 people on those buses that can take 45 people. I'm not sure who they are, but I'm sure statistics would be able to identify that they're maybe on benefits, so they're being paid anyway by the government or by the regional council to actually take that. Or it's free, so there's no revenue actually coming from those people anyway. Controversial, okay, that's fine. I'm not too worried about that, but I really do think that we need to look at a backdoor approach of what if we got rid of the buses rather than how can we make them work better, because they're not working. Very, very different approach. Everything, you probably hear all the submissions so far are how can we keep them and make them work better. But is an electric bus a better route? It's going round and round in circles with no one on it. The footprint, it's actually created in production of that, and the disposal of that bus, again, is questionable. So I estimated from my very basic review, I asked for statistics, but I didn't get any feedback from my submission. So I'm working blind here. That each passenger between the times of 10 and 4 would cost over $50 per person. And that was a conservative, maybe $100, I don't know. But to carry one person on a 45-seater bus for 4 kilometres and no others, we need to understand what's going on, really. The type of passenger, are they retired? Are they on benefits? Have they got a free travel pass? You know, where is this revenue coming from? The environmental cost. Again, oh, have I run out of time already?
Yes, you have.
My gosh.
Oh, thank you, Paul, for your submission. We do have your written submission here that we can refer to as well. We appreciate you coming in, but unfortunately your time is up.
Okay, I would like another 30 seconds. I've got 4 questions I'd like to pose to the meeting that I'd like to have recorded.
Could we just maybe get a written copy of those? That might be more helpful.
I've travelled 1.5 hours to get here. I'm asking for 30 seconds of extra time. Is that not unreasonable?
30 seconds. Off you
Okay,
go.
thank you. How long is the current bus contract locked in? And is it a problem to remove those buses? The cost of exit of those contracts, the cost to the ratepayer, and the cost to the environment of the footprint of empty buses going round and round and round all day. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, David, thank you for coming in. Thank you for your written submission as well. You have 10 minutes. If you would like to leave some time at the end for some questions,
Sure.
that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Fantastic. Great to be here today and great to see people on Zoom as well. Just 2 things before I open up for questions. One is I guess a modification or a slight change to my submission in that, I mean, obviously I'm taking it as read, and that was pointed out by one of my excellent members on the board that as written, it seems that I imply that there is poor education in Huntly and that one has to bus out or move out of Huntly to access good education. That's not what I meant at all. I meant that people perceive that to be the case. My kids went through Huntly, both primary and secondary, at local schools and received a very good education. So I just wanted to clarify that because that was not my intent, but as written, it would be taken like that. The second point is I would like to thank people for having the northern suburbs, especially Huntly, as part of the key part of the long-term plan. I guess that's the wrong noun, sorry, but you get my point. So it's really important to the township that we have access to good public transport, and it makes a big difference to our locals, to the employment opportunities they can access, and to the education that they can access, tertiary education being a big part of that. So thank you very much for those things, and I'm very happy to take questions.
Okay. Councillor Eugene.
Yep, thanks, David, for a presentation from the board. Dorothy Lovell was in here from the Taupiti Community Board today talking about she's finding it easier to use a car now because the bus is taking, well over an hour for her to get into the city, where the expressway now allows her 20 minutes and she's there. Do you find that is the length of time the bus takes an issue with people that transit into Hamilton City for work from Huntly area?
It's definitely an issue for those who have a car and could use their car instead of a bus. So it's not an issue for, say, my daughter, who we're not going to run into town, so she has to catch the bus. Whereas for people who could use a car and are time bound, that they need to be at work on time, yes, they are definitely unmotivated due to the length of time it takes.
So do you see a benefit in having like express bus services that from Huntly?
Totally.
I mean, it's obviously something we'd have to look at what the volumes are in those peak hours of the morning and in the evenings for workers. But something I think we should really consider going forward.
Yes, we would really appreciate that, and it would make a big difference to the bus usage and people being able to access employment opportunities.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. I can't see any further questions.
But clearly I wasn't controversial enough.
Yeah, we do appreciate your submission,
Sure.
so thank you.
No worries. I'll create extra time for you.
Thanks. See you. All right. Welcome to our colleagues from Hamilton City Council. We appreciate you coming in to see us today.
Gordon.
Thank you, Councillors Martin and Councillor Dave. Good to see you, Martin and Gordon. Right. We will give you 10 minutes to present, and then we can take questions after that 10 minutes, if that's helpful.
Sorry, a bit hard to hear. 10 minutes.
10 minutes for organisations to present is what we've consistently been doing all day, and then we can take questions after that. So we'll give you a little bit more time in recognition of that relationship.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. We would have hoped for a little bit more time, given that 90% of the region's buses operate in Hamilton, but we'll see how we go. Just turn my phone off. So introduced to the other committee members, obviously Councillor Gallagher here, and Martin Parks and Gordon Naidu from our city transportation team here to support this, and they've been involved in preparing it as well. Look, the first thing we'd like to say is it's not just because we have 90% of the region's buses that operating in the city, or the publicly subsidised buses. It's also because transport emissions are a massive problem within Hamilton City when you're thinking about emissions and going to the future. 64% of the emissions within Hamilton, carbon emissions, are from transport. So we have to do something that changes and turns that around. Across the whole region, it's only 16%, which may well be too high, but think about the difference in Hamilton, and that's why it's really important to us that we work hard on areas like public transport and other alternate modes of transport, not to remove cars, but to provide good alternatives, which we don't believe are good enough at the moment. And that's, we're not blaming anyone for that. We're saying that's the situation which we have to do something about. Just running through some of our points, we're keen to see that the future-proof plan and the metro spatial plan, especially the transport part of that, are reflected in this regional passenger transport document. We regard them as the sort of preeminent spatial planning documents for this region, and they have a heavy transport emphasis, which we want to see reflected in this, and mostly it is, but we think perhaps more explicitly some actual maps and references and links to the to those particular plans. There are some issues, other issues we want to cover. Electric charging points. We have already got the ducting in place for such an outfit in the Rotorua Transport Hub, and we're prepared to do more of that, though we would probably reflect something I understand GoBus point has also made to you, that things change so quickly. You don't want to sort of set up massive infrastructure in that area that might be changed in every 2 or 3 years. Something that's nimble in that area, and we're certainly into it as a council to do our part of that. The public transport operating model changes that are referred to as coming in here have now come, in our opinion, they're a little bit underwhelming. We're not sure how realistic it is to expect any regional council, except perhaps Auckland and Wellington, and maybe Christchurch, to buy or run their own bus systems. We think there needs to be more work done in that area, and we'd certainly like to work with the regional council on improving that sort of suggestion from government. Let's say it's their opening offer. I think we need to push them a bit harder to get something that works more for a mixed region like ours with metro and rural in it. As far as Te Huia goes, our council would like a more formal role in the governance of that, and not just for us, we might add also for Waikato District, though we don't want to speak for you, Eugene, but we believe that it shouldn't be just a regional council governed body that we happen to have a couple of members on. It should be a regional governance body that we all have a sort of an equivalent status within. It's quite important to us that that's successful. There are opportunities coming up all the time. I think every meeting of that governance group that's there at the moment discusses them. We find it a bit of a struggle to get them considered because it has to fit within the regional council framework. We'd like a better, more regional framework there to operate under. We'd suggest we're starting to get back into, and this is the area Martin and Gordon have been also working in, school travel plans, and we're putting more resource into that. We're trebling our staffing numbers in that area, which is not off a very low base of one. Ideally you'd want to double that at least, but we're interested to see what the regional council can do in that area as well, because those of us who live in the city and probably any of the bigger towns know that during school time, massive congestion problems and growing congestion problems. During school holidays, you can suddenly move around in your car, and that's a clear pointer to the fact that we have to do better in that school travel planning area, reduce the reliance on cars there, and buses are part of that. Another area is we'd like better links, PT links with our surrounding commuter towns like Cambridge. And that's a particular example. That's growing just as fast, if not faster, than Hamilton at the moment. And we're quite concerned that all that's been done in recent years is build a massive motorway between Cambridge and Hamilton. But what happens to the cars when they arrive in the city is a bigger problem now than it was when they started building it. And we note that they haven't yet, they being Kotahi, haven't yet completed the PT lane or whatever, T3, whatever sort of specialist lane that's going in there. That's sort of a real afterthought, and we think it's a missed opportunity. But we'd like also to see the regional council and the Waipa Council let contracts for more, for a lengthier service, both in terms of more frequent buses and going longer at the start and especially the end of the day. We've received lots of comments about that, to provide a real alternative to people having to use their car there. And we certainly, Hamilton ratepayers, we note, pay half of the subsidy towards services like that. So it's not like asking Cambridge or Te Awamutu residents for all of the subsidy. As far as the cheaper PT suggestion here, we certainly support that, but we don't think it goes far enough. And we note the resolution that was passed 6 months ago, Chair Angela, about supporting the push for a free PT or in the Connections Committee, and we'd like to see that kept on the agenda, if you like. We realise that it's a political issue that's going to have to continue to be pushed for a while, but we certainly think that the half-price fares across all our PT have shown that there's a real advantage in terms of building passenger numbers, building services, if you can move in that direction. The PT Business Improvement Review, what we strongly advocate for as a council is a co-governance / partnership model. We don't believe it should be a subcommittee of Waikato Regional Council or any other council, ours included. We like something more like the airport board model, where no one council has the ability to decide anything by itself, but there are shares, if you like, commensurate with the size and the economic size of the appropriate councils, but done in a sensitive way that sort of allows every part of the region to have influence. And we think that's the sort of model that should happen. In order to do this, there needs to be an agreement with all parties. I don't know what the government's going to say about this, but I believe we should come up with our own model and present that to the government in a way that works for all of our councils, that they can, whether it's Thames Coromandel, Dennis, or right down to South Waikato, they can all feel like they have a stake in it and influence in the outcome, genuine influence. Look, a couple of other points, sorry, just going through my notes here. The on-demand flex service, we have always... Okay, sorry. We've always supported that concept. We like the bus that operates, or buses that operate. I've used them myself for the airport. The only trouble was they weren't there when I came to fly home and want to come back into Hamilton. We would like to see them expand that, cover some of the immediately surrounding towns, have a look at how services can be provided, even say to the Gordontons of the area, ones that don't have any service at the moment, but also time-wise. They don't go late enough. We're too scared of the Taxi Federation and perhaps Uber. We need to actually, that's a great service that we need to push a bit more. The trial's not big enough to truly tell how influential it can be, but as a concept, we strongly support it, and we think it's a good size, and we like the operating model, except for the fact, I hope this is changing soon, the ticketing service isn't yet integrated. We would have liked that from day one. It means if you're taking a bus and the flex, which you have to do if you, for instance, going to the airport, you have to have 2 different tickets from 2 different systems. So that's a slight issue. We also think that your comments about working with, and our comments about working with the health services, whatever format they take, is really important. That's a major driver of car transport in the city at the moment. We'd like it to be a bigger driver of public transport and other modes. We'd like more services to not detour, but to go via the hospital, for instance, but perhaps some other medical centres could be acknowledged as well. There's the after-hours ones, which are quite heavily used also. It's certainly, but we support any moves to sort of factor that in going into the future. In the Metro Spatial Plan, we've talked about bus rapid transit corridors and services, which is an advance on the frequent services we have at the moment, like the Comet. We would like that explicitly acknowledged in the plan, bus rapid transit services and corridors. And just on that, there's a comment that the development would be along those bus rapid transit corridors. We would suggest a better wording would be in close proximity. We're looking at intensification, not just on, say, Te Rapa Road, if that happens to be a corridor, but within half a kilometre or 400 metres either side, so within walking distance of that. So the close proximity is a better terminology to explain what the city's looking at in terms of intensification, which would support bus rapid transit routes.
Councillor McPherson, you have unfortunately reached your 10 minutes, but I'm happy to allow questions now. Just bear in mind that we do have your written submission in front of us as well.
If they're anything like our councillors, not every word would have been written with the best will in the world.
But I really appreciate what you've said so far. Really good points, and yeah, happy to take questions. Councillor Eugene.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dave, for the presentation on Hamilton City. Some good comments and some good ideas put forward. So I have a couple of comments and one's a question. So this might be to Martin Parks around this. So we've had a few submitters earlier on talking about the desire or the use of the Tahuia and using the Frankton station, and their discussion was about the lack of bus services into the station, and the other thing was I think it was like safety concerns, because the trains, especially at this time of the year, leaving in the dark and returning in the dark, and a few people feel uncomfortable in that. So that could help hinder. And their response when they inquired about it was you could jump on the Orbit and get it at Rotokoti, but that created length times for these people and sort of sitting on a bus for quite a period of time circulating around. So just wondering if there was any thoughts on that, I know it might be more of a regional working together to.
And also the, sorry to Eugene, the orbiter on occasions with the evening service returning, the last orbiter has been leaving beforehand. We've had some issues which I've raised with Mark. Right. So there's extra problems like that. Do you want to talk about Frankton?
Sorry, just through the chair in response to that. I think that there's both parties are involved in that discussion, so WRC staff and HCC. Servicing Frankton in the future with regards to buses, but there's also, I agree, a need to improve or create a safer environment at these locations as well. So we are currently working with WRC staff on some safety improvements around that Frankton station area, like improving lighting and stuff like that, and maybe some CCTV stuff.
Could I add to that? I think that might be an opportunity to look at the flex services involvement with the train on the return journey, especially the last return journey, of course, to assist with that, almost without booking, having it available there. I don't know the details and wouldn't try and comment on them. The other thing is medium to long term, the city has reserved potential space for the railway station that would pick up people from Hamilton, being either at Seddon Park or even hopefully underneath Centre Place, where TGH has a long-term proposal. So you wouldn't build a Central City railway station at a place like Frankton nowadays. It just happens to be the history. And we'd certainly look at moving it closer to the city, but that's a few years off. Less than Martin thinks.
Yeah, and just another couple of comments. So you mentioned about with the airport service and the lack of it, you know, when planes arrive back in the evenings, and also piggybacking off some of those, widening that service. So WDC have funded themselves, because we didn't get Waka Kote funding around it, as having some trial services, which include like Gordington, Tamahere and Matangi, working with regional, how we can piggyback off some of the existing services instead of creating everything new, but just linking them up to the internal services that already happen.
Yeah, you'd be surprised, well, you wouldn't be, but some people would be surprised the amount of traffic that comes in from those surrounding areas that are just villages, and not even villages, for instance. And if you could divert some of that onto PT of some sort, would be a real advantage to you and us.
Absolutely. Sorry, Chair, but just one other comment was the your discussions with the DHB. I think that's a really important, can be quite a game changer for that part of the city, because of the fact there's, I don't know how many staff, but there's a massive amount of staff in there, and they all have trouble getting parking availability and et cetera, So if there's some form of park or some flexi service, because difficult part, I have a daughter that's a nurse and she's in her early 20s and she finishes at 10 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning. You know, it's not a safe environment too, so something DHB should really be working on.
No, certainly relate to that. We were in a previous life on the DHB, and like you, spouse works and had exactly that issue. And with the Health New Zealand, I think it's really important that we have that ongoing link with them, because acknowledge there are some safety issues for their staff as well. So I think that will still be an ongoing issue for all of us, frankly. With respect to the new system, it's going to be finding the right people who will be our advocates there.
Thank you, Eugene, for your questions. Councillor Tegg.
Yeah, thanks. Look, could I just begin by saying, Dave, I really appreciate your passion for public transport and the contribution, you know, you've made over many years on that and climate action. And thank you for your submission. You mentioned in your comments the need to be flexible around charging infrastructure, and I think you make a good point. I just wonder whether you believe the council itself has the planning provisions in place to be nimble enough itself in that area, not only just for PT, but you know, for heavy vehicles and even the light fleet, because there's going to be some major sort of new innovation coming.
well, without being an absolute expert in that area, though I do have an EV nowadays, I think that we're not as well served going forward as we need to be in terms of charging points for all types of electric vehicles. And that probably goes for bicycles as well, all the way up to heavy vehicles, including buses. We, at the very least, our council, probably needs to look at its district plan provisions and building consent provisions that require larger private developers to include facilities, at least the connection points, so that the facilities can be, the actual charging plate or whatever can be put in at a later stage. There are large supermarket developments that could very usefully use that. Some of them have car chargers, but some of them also route buses through or alongside there and have stop-off points even there. So we should be doing more there, and it may be, I know the regional councillors been looking at a regional EV charging plan. Probably not the right name, but perhaps that's a place where that could be coordinated. I know Angela's been working with you guys on that a bit. I'm not sure where that's got to, but the worry is that with the big uptake in electric vehicles of all sorts in the last several months and going ahead a lot more coming up in the lift, that we're going to be a bit further behind the 8 ball than we should be.
Yeah, thank you. One last question from Councillor O'Leary.
You've put in your submission about the servicing big events, and we had a submission this morning from Fieldays who were asking, because in the proposed plan it says that we will give or look at free buses, look at putting on free buses for large scale events if the entry's free. But his concern was he is aware that for other events, and he might have said Sevens, that's a paid event, there has been, or similar, there has been free buses in the past. So would you, can I say would we, because you know, would we
HCC?
Would we support a change in the policy and the plan for large scale events, regardless of whether there's a gate fee or not?
I think so, because the important thing is accessibility and moving people around without choking up the city or wherever the events happen to be. Not so much the charging. There are more ways than one to skin the cat. And I certainly recall large rugby matches in the past had free buses, but they were charge events. But there was initially, I have no idea where that's got to, a loading built into the ticket price that we required from the Waikato Rugby Union. And I did think there was something with the Mystery Creek organisation at one stage too that subsidised at least there. I think the regional council and whichever council happens to be approving the event, because it could be something out at the surf area at Raglan, for instance, or could in future the cycle Vantage-Drome could be the Commonwealth Games cycling base, you know, in 32, I think they're looking at. We need to make sure that they have things written into the contracts and agreements and plans so that the organisers of those events have to talk with your bus people to do that, and we'd certainly support any moves in that area. If you're going to make it free, it's very easy to attract people to use it. If you're not going to make it free, if they jigger around with charges and that, you're not going to get much uptake.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for your question, and once again, thank you for your attendance and coming in person to present to us. We really appreciate it. And just before you go, Martin and Dave, I wish you all the best. And yeah, really have valued your contributions over your time in local government. So
thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I believe that our next presenters are online. We've got Chris Ford and Timothy Young online, so welcome. You've got 10 minutes for your submission. If you'd like to leave some time at the end for questions, that would be fantastic. But yeah, over to you. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou, kia ora koutou, Chair and Councillors. We are Chris Ford, Regional Policy Advisor, Disabled Persons Assembly, based in Ōtepoti, Dunedin.
Welcome. Carry on.
Tim's just coming in. He's just switching on his audio.
Oh, can we unmute Tim? Would that help?
Yes.
Sorry.
There we go. Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah. Kia ora tātou. My name's Tim Young. I'm a DPA member and Chief Executive of Smart Access and a PhD candidate at the University of Waikato.
We're here to present the DPA Disabled Persons Assembly submission on the Council's Regional Passenger Transport Plan for the next 10 years. Before we launch into highlighting some of the key recommendations we made and taking your questions, we'd like to reiterate again our thanks to former Council Officer Susie Marinkovic, who drove the establishment of the Busset Free Fare Scheme for disabled people and their support people in the Waikato.
We see much to commend in this plan, but we've also made some recommendations of areas that need improvement too. Essentially, we believe that universal design should underpin all planning and provision and communication around public transport. And with this in mind, we'll move to some recommendations we wish to highlight.
The first series of recommendations that we wish to highlight are that and as you probably read in the submission, is that the Waikato Regional Council collaborate in a co-design process with Disabled Persons Assembly, other disabled persons organisations, people's organisations, and the Disabled People's Forum on all accessible transport initiatives contained within the transport plan. We believe that interregional services need to become accessible. We do support the expansion of the Flex on Demand scheme, which is much better than total mobility, as it caters much more to people's individual needs with wider availability and reliability over accessible taxis. In fact, being based here in Ōtepoti, Dunedin, we don't have such a service here as yet. I was very excited and almost fell off my wheelchair when I heard about it. But anyway, the next recommendation is that the Regional Council work alongside DPA, the Disabled People's Forum, and other disabled people's organisations, both locally and nationally, to call for more central government funding to enable the total mobility scheme, to also roll out the Flex on Demand service to a wider area, and for all public transport platforms to be fare free for all New Zealanders, echoing the call of the Aotearoa Public Transport Coalition. And also, just another key recommendation we wish to stress is that on total mobility and the Flex on Demand service, that the Regional Council ally with both DPA and other local and national disabled people's organisations to lobby central government for more funding to ensure that more accessible mobility vehicles are placed into service around Waikato, along with sufficient drivers paid a living wage to drive them. Such moves would ensure that we as disabled people have equitable access to a 24/7 mobility vehicle service on the same basis as non-disabled people who have access to ordinary taxis or public transport. And over to Tim.
So, disabled person, excuse me. Disabled Persons Assembly recommends that both urban and interurban services should be fully compliant with accessibility standards, especially those around the requirements for urban buses, which have been recently updated by the central government. I think Hamilton's been leaders in making sure that all the buses are fully wheelchair accessible. This leads on to another recommendation we outlined in an earlier written submission as well, that the final RPTP mandates the publishing of all information and communications around public transport in accessible formats, including New Zealand Sign Language, easy read, braille, large print, and audio. This includes web-based information as well. There's this is really important that all of this information is accessible by all people. We've had some of our community members recently say that, you know, the signage when they go to a bus stop, they can't access the times, and the application can be hard for them to use as well. So it's hard for them to plan a trip properly. And also we encourage all bus stops having full weather protection. This is really important for a lot of disabled people to go in the extreme weathers in the summer and winter to make sure that they don't overheat or get too cold. And also having high quality tactile strips at all bus stops to enable ease of navigation by blind and visually impaired people. So in conclusion, DPA recommends that public transport and schemes such as total mobility and flex are expanded and provided to the disabled community for free to ensure equal access to the community. DPA also recommends that all aspects of public transport, including shelters, signage, and communications, are suitable for all ratepayers. And data should be collected and shared with the public around the improvement of these services to demonstrate the benefits of such measures on the community. Thanks for your time. We welcome any questions.
There we go. Thanks, Chris and Tim, for your presentation. We do have some questions for you. Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you. Hi, Chris. It's Angela O'Leary here. I saw you a couple of weeks ago when you presented to our infrastructure committee. And hi, Tim. It's nice to see you. Haven't seen you for a while.
Yeah.
Thanks for your presentation and submission. Just two questions. The first one is, are there, and I think I'm picking this up from your submission, in terms of vehicles, excluding buses for the moment, in terms of vehicles that have mobility access, are they still only available for the sector for limited hours during any day? Is that what you were touching on?
Yeah, so the total mobility scheme is obviously with taxis, but they aren't available all night, the wheelchair accessible ones, and they're often limited, especially around school time and late at night. So the flex on demand, I think would, have a lot of potential to be available at more hours of the night, and obviously buses aren't available everywhere all the time.
Yeah. Okay. And this morning we heard from Roger Drower from Hearing Dogs for Deaf People New Zealand about the barriers to get assist dogs onto buses. Are you both aware of any of that being an issue in your communities? Of drivers not allowing assist dogs onto buses?
I haven't heard that firsthand personally.
Okay, no, that's okay. And just a follow-up question on that. He also talked about the area at the front of buses that is supposed to be for or should be for people with disabilities and with wheelchairs, and that front of bus area needs to be better designed, better signage and all of that stuff. Can you comment on that aspect of the bus network?
No, I can't, sorry. But based on my experience in other places, it definitely helps when there's good signage and tie downs for wheelchairs so you don't rock around, and obviously that lends to having good driver training as well.
Yeah.
I can't really answer that either, but from what I understand, the government has, under Waka Kotahi, the requirements for urban buses, and accessibility is one of those requirements. So whether bus companies and so forth who are contracted by regional councils are following those, then that's another question I think that needs to be put to them.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
All right. Thank you, Chris and Tim, for presenting to us today. Unfortunately, your time is now up. But yeah, really appreciate your written submission and your verbal submission as well. Some really good points in there that we'll definitely take on board. So yeah, thank you. And yeah, we'll see you another time.
Thank you very much.
Ka kite.
Ka kite.
Ka kite.